Good afternoon, everyone. I'm in continued celebration of this special month being Black History Month. I have the pleasure of sitting down with Greg Boler, a distinguished alumni from our university, Georgia State University, and a big-time supporter of the commercial real estate group at GSU. And he's had such a distinguished career, and it's honestly my honor to go ahead and interview him. But before I jump into it, for those that are new and don't know much about him, I'd love to give a brief introduction. Greg Boler Jr. serves as a founding and managing partner for KMT Partners. KMT is a minority-owned commercial real estate investment firm that sources and executes unique commercial and industrial development opportunities within primary emerging markets across the East Coast. With most of his career, Greg is focused on the industrial and logistics sector and has nearly 15 years of commercial real estate experience. Over his career, Mr. Boler has sourced and executed more than 20 million square feet of development, which is equivalent to $2.5 billion, a stabilized value. And from my own personal experience, a phenomenal mentor, a servant in the community, a part of 100 Black Men in Atlanta, and currently serving as the leader and chair for NAIOP Georgia as well, leading their new initiatives and internship program, which many of us have been beneficiaries of. Did I miss anything?
Also on the board of Ron Clark Academy. But yeah, no, you were spot on.
Thank you. I've really been looking forward to this conversation, and leading up to it, I was meditating. I was like, where do I really want to start off from? Many times we have these conversations, we start from the beginning, but I want to just, start with a softball question. What's been on your mind most recently? But what are the things that currently, you spend most of your time thinking about nowadays?
Yeah. So no, look, I mean, I think for me, most recently is really been focused on, I'm at this weird place to where it's a great place to be at, but to where, from a startup of an entrepreneurship standpoint, your whole thing is trying to build this plane and get it up in the air, right? And I've always been told from a lot of my mentors that ultimately, hey, like, you're still going to be building this plane while it's up in the air. And so that is where I'm at, to where it is up in the air. I do have my first deal that is under construction. I got an RFP I need to respond to on that. We're seeing a lot of interest there. And so that's good, right? That first deal really kind of like gets you off the ground, right? It's like, okay, no, this guy's real. His company is real. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, how real? And right now I have about three big deals in Atlanta and Pennsylvania that are kind of becoming extremely critical to major milestones, between zonings, and then the one up in PA is more of a capitalization, so sourcing the equity, for that deal. And so these deals, if all were to happen, are game changers. If 2 out of the 3 happen, it's a game changer. If one happens, it's still a game changer depending upon which one. Right. But the way I like to play the game is I lean in, I focus up. And so, I need to make sure that there's not any distractions that take away from these things becoming successful ultimately. And granted, there's some things that are out of your control, but I fully believe that if you put enough energy into something and you're constantly thinking about it happening and you're mitigating the risk that come about, you have a pretty good chance of it actually being successful in the way that you want it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
One thing that I've been hearing a lot amongst these conversations, that it takes talent, it takes a skill set, but then most importantly, to those that are able to stand the test of time, it takes an ongoing passion to wake up and to truly actually want to do it. And we actually spoke with Keith Mack earlier, and he actually mentioned you as one of the up-and-comers that not only just has a distinguished background, but also has a passion to give back and a passion to wake up and to actually do that. And, could you really just speak on that, working with passion in mind, and how developing and really focusing on that has allowed you to actually take on something that's not meant for everybody, being an entrepreneur and running your own business? Can you just speak to that passion?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think I've always believed in lifting as I climb, right? Like that's probably at the core, of what drives me. And that's also, it's also leaving a legacy, right, as well. And so, my goal is to provide opportunities for others that look like me, and that not necessarily as they for me, it wasn't another industrial platform that I could point to and be like, wow, like, look at that brother. Like he's actually doing it and in this space. And the beautiful thing about Atlanta is that it's Wakanda. For the most part, there isn't an industry that somebody has not pioneered, right? And so, but in commercial real estate, it's fairly homogeneous. Not a lot of Black and brown people in that industry by itself. And then when you kind of dig in a little bit more and you focus more on specific property types, it gets even smaller, right? And so industrial is one that I just grew to love the property type. It was, perfect between the complexities of development is extremely complex from a site work standpoint, as well as the autonomous robotics that go inside of that facility as well. And it's the backbone of, our economy. And I think, that was proven a lot more during the pandemic as folks started to order more and could not get those products. And so that's kind of clear proof to, okay, wow, like warehousing, distribution, manufacturing is a key driver and something that's needed. And so the passion is a mixture of all of that, and things just really kind of falling in line as I continue to want to gain more skill sets, and say, okay, well, hey, I have the technical side to where I have the project management. I understand how to manage the GCs, the architects, the engineers, ask the right questions, dig in, right? And then it's like, okay, I need to get the business acumens, which is where I, ended up going to Georgia State and, getting that business acumen of what is exactly does commercial real estate look like holistically, and which exposed me a lot more to other entrepreneurs in our space. And the beauty of commercial real estate is that is not really as corporate as people think. It's extremely entrepreneurial. That is essentially how the industry got started, is a lot of family-owned businesses that are doing multi-million-dollar deals. So knowing all these things and realizing who I am as a leader and a man of the community again, and wanting to lift as I climb and provide other opportunities. I can provide more opportunities when I control my platform, and I'm not having to go to someone else and ask for permission to provide these opportunities. It's, so you can kind of skip over that when you're adding value in the space. And so yeah, that it's kind of, again, just a mixture of all of that, and things have just kind of been put in my way. And then it comes down to a why not me question.
I personally love that question. And one of the things that I think I admire from afar from you is how you've created this niche from yourself, but you've also built a brand around that niche, and you've invested greatly to cultivate that. Because you touched on something which is very true. Real estate is known to be a good old boys club. A lot of it comes from the past. And oftentimes the misnomer in real estate is that, okay, we just put up buildings. And that's one way that people look at it, but we're really developing communities. We're bringing economic activity to the table. So when you have a situation in Atlanta and across the country where many neighborhoods, the real estate at the heart of all economic activity isn't owned, isn't being controlled by the actual stakeholders. And you touched on it, there's a gap that needs to be filled. And you also touched on the entrepreneurship and just taking a step back towards you growing up. What was it like within your household, in the Boler household? And, what were the early signals and what were the early lessons that you gained that kind of built that spirit, that passion that we see portrayed now?
Oh, so I'm originally from Philadelphia, right? Which is, it's a blue collar, grind, gritty, right, type of city. Which again, at the core of who I am from a personality standpoint, I'm extremely driven because of the rough edges that I got in Philadelphia, and love the city to death. My parents are still there, grandparents, cousins, and all of that. And I continue to make sure that my investments from a development standpoint are in that area, as well. And so again, lifting as I climb, and being an example, providing exposure, it really doesn't mean as much if you can't do it for the people that really help create who you are. But I am the middle of 6 kids, and 5 boys, 1 girl. The girl is the oldest, and that in itself can create a different type of chip on your shoulder, right? Being a middle child, but being a middle child of so many kids.
Fighting for food.
Say it again.
Fighting for food.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to have sharp elbows, put it that way. But it's more of it's a constant fight for love, right? At the core of it, right? It's hey, I'm looking for this attention. I would love to be able to, get this attention, but yeah, obviously it's spread across so many kids, and you can get to the point to where you're like, okay, well, I understand where I am, in this story. And it's not a bad place. They don't love you any less, and they're going to make sure that you still have a very structured lifestyle. So my dad he's retired from the military. He also worked at PennDOT. He was a regional facility manager there. He was a command sergeant major in the Army, and so very much a rigorous, stern man that was still very loving and made sure that if there was anything that was important to us, it wasn't a game that my dad missed. And that was for all of us, right? And for the most part, he would try to make all of the practices as well. And sometimes he would have two jobs, and so, I always appreciated that, is that he would always go over and beyond. And he did not have a father figure in his life. And so that was one of the things that was very much important to him, is just being a great provider and father and husband. And my parents are still married. They've been together for almost 4 decades. And so it's that type of love, but you're going to work hard, right, as well. And they did not play about grades. You could not bring home a C. And we played a lot of sports. So he always made sure we were busy, which is very much important. Is, okay, you're in school. That's great. Everybody can do that, but you need to be able to balance this outside of school to help build your character and work ethic and teamwork, right, and discipline. And so, it literally was football, basketball, track. And really for all of my siblings, and we all started when we were 6, 7 years old, and majority of us played through high school. 2 of us ended up actually playing full all of our years in college as well, as far as football. But being that I was the middle, I was also the first, though, to go to college and to graduate. And I left Philadelphia because I recognized that my older siblings, just learning from them, right? And this is, I think, a lot of people don't take heed to this, is just learning from other people's mistakes. Don't fall in the same trap that somebody else has done in front of you. And so I was like, hey, I need to get out of the city, which was very much important, just to kind of pull yourself away from certain individuals that might not be in the same headspace or getting the same guidance. And so I got an opportunity to tour Florida A&M University. It's a whole story behind that. I won't bog you guys down with that. But once I toured FAMU, I fell in love with the campus. I had no idea that HBCUs could be that large, right? So in the Philadelphia area, you got Cheney, you got Lincoln, which are some of the older HBCUs in the country, but they're extremely small and limited resources, and their football teams are Division II, Division III. And so going to Florida A&M, saying, okay, this is D1 ball, and I mean the campus is huge. I mean, it's basically like 10,000 students, not including graduate students. The weather's great, and in Tallahassee, I'm meeting people from all across the country, like really kind of seeing the diaspora of Black people, which I enjoyed, a lot. And so, I asked my dad before I came home from that visit if I could go there. I was like, hey, I really want to go here. I'm going to walk on. I'm going to, they have a really strong engineering school. It's actually a joint program with Florida State since the 80s. And so it's 50-50 ownership, which I like that as well, because I was sitting right next to the Florida State students. So they couldn't necessarily say they were getting a different education, which we were not. And nobody was either smarter or not in that aspect. But I said, hey, I'm going to walk on. I'm going to earn a scholarship. And my dad said, look, like, whatever it takes, I'll support you. And thank God he did that, because who knows? We would not be interviewing each other right now. But I ended up going there, and I walked on and made the team, earned a scholarship, and that's how I paid for school. And I did finish with mechanical engineering degree.
Wow. One of my favorite shows growing up, and my father would talk about watching this, especially from Nigeria, but Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And you coming from Philadelphia, I'm thinking the exact same thing. And it kind of goes into, a question that, was on my mind. And, we talked about in concept, but, the moment it just clicked for you as far as, okay, this is the game. And now I have to actually carve a route to get there. Was there a moment either when you arrived at FAMU or maybe early in your life in conversation with your father, there's like, when did you realize, like, all right, this is what success means. This is how I achieve it in America.
Yeah, I did not know that in school. For me, the biggest thing of success was finishing school. I remember, as I said, all of my other siblings did not go to college and finish. And so that was probably more impactful than anything, really thinking about my two younger siblings coming behind me, setting an example for them. Again, lift as I climb, right? And I recognize that if I was able to be successful in being a college graduate, and then ultimately figuring it out from there. Whatever was out there, right? I can figure that out. But I need to get this college degree. And I mean, my parents did not at that time did not have college degrees either. And so, it was a major thing for my family, which I'm eighth generation in the United States, right? And so, nobody else had went to college. So it was just one of those things that was very much important. Now, after college and getting the opportunity to go to JLL and being exposed to commercial real estate and being near long enough to where I was like, okay, this is industry is one like for the most part, it's kind of like a hidden industry, right? Most people just have no idea, and you kind of touched on this before, have no idea what exactly this is, and how it operates and how these buildings get built, and so um, when I further got the opportunity to join Transwestern Development and get insight into how generational wealth is created in the industry. And then Transwestern is one of those family-owned companies. It's private, right? A developer, and they were founders, a spinoff from another family-owned company, Trammell Crow Company. But I read a book, called, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? About Reginald Lewis. And that was in 2016. That at that point, I realized that I can do more, and it did give me more of a sense of probably where I fit in America, in our community, still maintaining the same passions that I've always had. But it's like, okay, no, you've been gifted really with the opportunity of being in this unique industry and being in this unique property type. And you love it. And then being in Atlanta as well. So everything was just kind of perfectly aligned to where reading that book really let me know, like, okay, one, I need to get on the ownership side myself. I need to be an entrepreneur myself. And people like Egbert Perry, were great mentors to me, still are to this day, to where I was able to get a lot of insight from, and guidance and encourage and kind of building that up over the time. But I would say when I read that book is when it really just let me know, like, okay, if this guy did it back then, I can do it too. Why not get $1 billion company?
One of the things that I've learned just speaking with so many different influential Black developers in Atlanta, and honestly, I think everybody in life always gives you one moment where you're right place, right time, but that's not where it ends. The question from there is, do you have the right people around you? Are you in the right headspace at the time? And then do you still have the legs to actually continue running? And I think we all have that moment. And for those of us and, individuals like yourself that were able to take advantage of that moment, the journey just doesn't stop there. I think you realize, like Nelson Mandela says, there's another mountain right in front of you. And if you could just touch on like tackling that next mountain, coming to a shop in Transwestern, we're like, okay, now I'm learning behind the curtain how this is done. And now you kind of see that next mountain in front of you. What was it like just like tackling that once you left it?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, life is very much similar to commercial real estate industry. Like it's cyclical, right? And so there's going to be peaks and valleys, and the my career from starting in 2011 at JLL, and that cycle was just starting to recover. And thankfully, Obama did a great job as far as a recovery, and he was able to be in there for 2 terms. And so there was just constant growth, right? And sustainable growth and certainty. And so from an investment standpoint, investors and capital, right, can get a lot more active when there's certainty in the markets. And so, being able to join Transwestern, and that came through, just a referral. They was looking for a project manager that had an industrial exposure, but wanted to kind of grow into being a developer. And again, this was unique in a sense to where I was able to join a gentleman that was running the entire East Coast. He was there for 2 years. And I was not only the development manager, I was the construction manager and the analyst, right, for 2 years. And so there was typically that's 2 different roles, and I learned a ton, but I was just so focused, right, on, okay, I have this opportunity, I have this work, not necessarily, again, really understanding how important the opportunity really was. Being able to see how we capitalize deals, how we tie them up, how we underwrite the deals, how we invest in the deals, how does that look on a return basis? It still wasn't, that was foreign, right? You're not getting that at JLL, right? It's just base salary and bonus. And so there's no risk that's being taken there. And so, it was more of, I just want to continue to do a great job in that role, and realizing, I did not realize at that time that is typically a 2-person role. That's a whole other aspect, right? So again, just when you're in the middle of it, and the work is there in front of you for you to be able to add value, you're brought to that team to be able to execute on these tasks. Just do it to the best of your abilities, right? And as you continue to do that, and people can depend on you more, you'll get more roles, right? You'll get more responsibility. You'll get more exposure. I remember going to just a golf outing with the team, and the founder of the company, he was in Chicago. He flew down, and I just remember overhearing them talking about their investments in some of the projects, and kind of them, what their expectations were on what it looked like on the promotes, et cetera, and who was getting what parts of the development fee. And at that time, like when I was brought on, it was a salary plus bonus, and they said, hey, you can invest however much money you got in these opportunities, right? So I mean, my first investment was like $3,000. Like, it wasn't, and that was a lot, right? Like that was a lot for me to invest in something. $3,000, you don't know if you're going to get that back at all. Now, I've done extremely well with that one investment, right? It was like a 10x, and so it's just like, if I had more money, I would have been able to put more into it.
You touched on something huge there, and you've always told me this anytime I've run into you. And last time we were at the Circle of Trust at Keith Max Happy Hour, you told me again, like, you got to pay your dues.
Got to.
Not working, 2 jobs at one time. Like, there's anything all my Black members, like, Ida, you have to pay your dues. You have to put your head down, work, and have an excellent mindset at the forefront of everything. And I know
it's track record.
Yeah.
It's track record. Like, that's you can't move forward if you don't have the track record that multiple people can point to without even asking you, right? It's just more of like, no, look at what Ade did that, he did that, and just conversations that you're not even aware of, right? And so, but yeah, you can't skip the work. You really can't. And so as long as you're doing that to the best of your abilities and adding value in your role, then you can say, okay, I got this down pat. I want to learn this, right? So for me, it was, I understood the construction and how to build it. I understood how to underwrite the deals. Now, like, I want to understand how this partner here, right, the guy that hired me, and he's making certain types of money, which I was kind of alluding to at the golf event, but how is he adding value on the front end? How is he sourcing these deals? How is he getting through this entitlements? And so I wanted to get more on the front end of these deals, and understand that, because that is where the ultimate value is created. There's no construction. There's no, the underwriting is great, but like those numbers can be fudged depending upon, who's paying for it. But it really kind of comes down to being on the front end and adding the value on the
I think
entitlement.
I've learned like real estate's really simple in thought, actually. And oftentimes at the highest level, I'm learning this because I'm still at an analyst point of view, is that you really don't get paid the big bucks to go ahead and get in the weeds and mitigate everything. You get paid to connect the dots. How can we put one and two together and keep the ball rolling? Like, how can we keep the ball rolling? And I think, when you spent the time paying your dues earlier and earlier, and you actually have the humility to be like, I'm going to do work and not get credit for it, and it's okay. Longer run, I'm going to be able to generate the discernment to actually make my own calls. And with that, that kind of brings me into a big topic that I want to jump into, is sacrifice and success.
Mhm.
Or that I've studied this industry and the professionals within it, sacrifice and success stay right next to each other. The
Mhm.
more success you experience, the more you have to sacrifice.
Mhm.
And I like to use sports analogies, and I think of someone like LeBron who's had a ton of longevity, and
Mhm.
he's actually put more time into maintaining his body. He's actually sacrificed more and more to stay good for as long as he's been. So it hasn't declined. And I think that's true in this industry as well. And for you, when you think of just sacrifice and success in your life, I think for everybody to see, they can see the success. Most people
Yeah.
don't see the sacrifice.
Mhm.
The sacrifices that Greg Boler has had to, engage in order to put himself where he is right now.
Yeah, look, I think it's time, right? Because I certainly want to make, I'm very much family centered, right, as well. And again, that's a big part of my upbringing is I want to make sure that my kids know that I'm always there for them, and I'm not going to miss a game, and I'm just on them just as much about their grades, et cetera, right? So like the family is certainly the center of that. And then, everything else, really majority of it goes towards work and putting in that time, however much time is needed, and making how many phone calls as I need to make to be able to, again, I'm more in the risk mitigation business and the relationship business. And so, my job is to constantly leverage relationships to mitigate risk as much as possible, right? And so that is a ongoing thing that that might go later into the night. It could be early into the morning, right? It doesn't matter. Whenever it needs to get done is when it needs to get done. And then it's the community impact aspect, because I always believe, obviously, that what you give is what you get back. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's just transferred from one entity to another, right? And so ultimately, I want to make sure that I'm constantly giving positive energy on out. And so the sacrifice, I would say, is more of just the time, and that there's certain things that I would love to be able to attend, or I would love to be able to catch up with friends and have these dinners and go on trips, to certain places when they're all my friends going on trips, and with their significant others, and I'm just like, look, I can't go. I got a zoning meeting next week, right? That's so it's just um those aspects of prioritizing what's important. And then once you get past those major milestones, you do focus on what's the most important. Then you can, do a lot more at your leisure. And truthfully, those same friends probably aren't going to be able to do those trips that you want to do. And that's okay.
Can we cut deeper into that? Because I think,
Yeah.
especially when you're a successful Black man and you've kind of differentiated yourself, there's so many pressures, people pulling you left and right. So many people want different things from you. So many people
Mm-hmm.
want you to step up to this podium, this podium. How have you just staged yourself, maintained your
Yeah.
credibility, like through all of those voices? How have you learned to filter them out? Is it the ties to your family and how it keeps you grounded? What's the key to that?
Yeah, I mean, your values are are number one, right? It's like, okay, what things center you and what's important to you, and so as family is important to me, the black family, is very much important to me. As we need more, that is the foundation necessarily of wealth creation. My wife, she's also an entrepreneur as well. She's an HR consultant. So we got two entrepreneurs in the household, as well, with two active boys. And so, having having those values, but education is important, which is why when I got the opportunity to be on the board of Ron Clark Academy, I was like, well, I've already had a lot of synergies and relationships with that school. I love the impact that they have had on a lot of kids that come from, impoverished areas, and those that, come from more middle class and upper middle class, as well, right? So it's a great balance. But seeing these kids as they get older and being successful in society is huge. And they're extremely smart as well. And so that's important. And then, 100 Black Men, actually my first exposure to, 100 Black Men was when I played football at FAMU, and they would play against Tennessee State at the Georgia Dome for the Atlanta Classic. And the 100 Black Men put on that event. And at the halftime, they would give scholarships away to HBCU students. And I just used to be like, man, who are these Black guys with these blazers looking all sharp, giving away money, to more of our people? Like, it was profound for me. I just never seen that before. And so from that exposure portion, I said, I will be a part of that organization. Started being a part of Omega Psi Phi, in college. And again, nobody else in my family is Greek, did not go to college. So that was a whole new exposure and a whole new education. But what we stand on as far as manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift, right? Like, these are all things that I still live by to this day. Having all these values allows me to be able to look at other things and say, okay, this is worth my time, this isn't worth my time. Or, hey, I'll probably have somebody better for you for this opportunity. And you'll see that reciprocation as well, even without wanting it. But it always, just the way the world works is, you give and you end up getting back. So
You mentioned your wife, and you've mentioned your family consistently through this conversation.
mm.
What lessons have you learned from being married, a husband, from your wife specifically? And what has life, giving you children, also taught you about maybe life, the intersection between work? What lessons have you learned from just raising their children of your own?
Yeah, it's tough because neither one of us, my wife and I, she's also, well, she's not first. Her grandfather did graduate with his college degree, but her parents did not. But she's from Atlanta, or I think she's ninth generation Georgian, right? Like, it's pretty deep. But the entrepreneurship aspect is new to the family, and from a generational standpoint, same on my side of the family, that's totally new. And so I think it's more so beautiful because, like, what I always imagine is that at the dinner table, and, we're eating breakfast or we're leaving, or, hey, daddy has to go to this meeting, et cetera, I can explain more to them as to how that ties to the business, and then ultimately how that these things can trickle into bigger opportunities for them in the future, right? If they choose to necessarily follow in that path, but it at least gives them another option that they might not even have. And so I think that was probably the biggest portion that has been eye-opening, is really having more and more conversations, especially with my oldest, who's 11. He's very much inquisitive and analytical. And so, he when he gets information, it takes, he'll digest it and then kind of come back with like a myriad of questions. A little later on, and you're like, oh, okay, he did actually like understand what I was saying. So that's been an adjustment, but the flexibility has been great from an entrepreneurship standpoint too. Certainly, like my wife, for example, I mean, she serves on the PTA, and this is her third year kind of leading up the Black History Month events for my kids' school. And she's able to do that because she has the flexibility of her business, right? And so, but it's financially, it's a sacrifice at the end of the day, right? So you got to figure out, okay, well, what's more important? And, for example, it's winter break right now for them. And one, I just think they have too many breaks nowadays anyway, but that's a whole other argument. But it's winter break for them. Like, we're not going anywhere. Like, it's like, hey, we're We're going to go to the movies. We're going to see Captain America. Later on today, we're going to go to Sandbox VR, to do the virtual reality. I think they have their banquet for their football team tomorrow. My oldest has 7-on-7 games over the weekend. And, we have our tutor that comes to the house to make sure they're still staying sharp educationally throughout the week. Yeah, they're at home here, and if I need to be at home to at least be a presence here versus going to the office, then I'll do that, and I don't have to worry about talking to a manager and asking them, hey man, this is what's going on. Then it's like, no, like my family needs my presence there.
You've taken control of your own destiny.
Yeah, and your time. Yep. Very much so. So no, like I mean, that's the beauty of it all. But again, it is sacrifices. But we're going somewhere for a spring break in 30 days. So they'll be fine. All good.
I think if anything, they're definitely going to grow up gritty, and they're definitely going to grow up with desire. But you've accomplished so much. You've been across the industry. Can you just take us back to that first feeling when the first deal closed? And what was this first initial emotion? What was going on in your mind? Just like, what did you feel having known where you came from, Philadelphia?
Yeah, no, I mean, first deal with the company. Yeah. So I mean, I went out on my own September, of 2023, and we closed on my first deal. We closed on the land in January of 2024, right? So a very short time period to be able to secure that first deal. And yeah, I mean, again, that's kind of just one of those things, right time, right place. And also, again, all of the relationships that I was able to garner over the past, 15 years, I was able to leverage that. And my investment strategy just was perfect, and it made a ton of sense. And the property type is what everybody wants to be in, but it was still so much uncertainty from the interest rate environment, and how does that affect cap rates, and where are rental rates going to be, and what does the leasing look like? Overall fundamentals are still a little out of whack. But if people could find value in this moment to where a lot of people were on the sidelines, then you won. And so this was one that a friend of mine that I've known since my JLL days, and he's a broker. Met up with him, kind of told him what I was looking for. And typically I don't do IOS. So IOS is industrial outdoor storage. So truck trailers, parking, maintenance, truck terminals, right? Everything but a typical bulk distribution warehouse or manufacturing facility. This one was unique because most IOS is smaller, about 2 to 5 acres, and it's either gravel or it's paved. You might have a facility on it, you might not. And this was one where he was like, hey, like, a seller has tied it up, done a ton of due diligence on it. They just want to flip out of it. It makes more sense to do IOS. It's a larger IOS deal is 13 acres, right? That's rentable, but 54 acres total. And so majority of it is a former landfill. And so that was my first landfill deal, right? So like that's, like this is everything, all of the skill sets, all of the experience, right? All the relationships all kind of come together. And I leaned all the way in. And now the good thing is during my time period at Bridge, there was a lot of data analytics that we were actually doing where we were just kind of tracking iOS and the growth of it and monitoring what the rents look like in the market, right? Which corridors have the most tenant demand? What are these tenants look like, right? And so I already had a good basis of what the product type was and where, if I was going to do it, where I wanted to be, which this Moreland corridor is the preeminent corridor for that. And so, yeah, when I did the underwriting, and it was like, yeah, this is like a damn near a 9 yield on cost, which is just crazy. I mean, we're probably going to exit around like a 7, maybe 6.5, but probably like a 7. So you're talking about 200 bip spread, right? Development spread. And, historically that spread has been anywhere from 100 to 150 bips, right? And so it's like, okay, this might be too good to be true, but let me bring it to, some of the partners that I was talking to as a co-GP partnership standpoint. And that helps me really kind of mitigate my risk and kind of helps me to bolster on the infrastructure of accounting and insurance and things of that aspect, being that I'm still a one-man band. But I can still get the upside of a larger share of the promote and the development fees and things of that aspect, but might not have to contribute as much. But I'm doing all the day to day. And that's what a developer is. And that is how we get paid anyway. And so I brought it to them, and they knew iOS. They had been in the space for a very long time. They had a capital partner that was programmatic, that was specific for iOS. They typically did not do development for it, but where that location was, and based upon my underwriting and investment strategy I put together on it, it was just one of those easy check the box moments. And so, yeah, we were able to close in the land with my co-GP partner. And then we ended up securing that programmatic LP after that. And then the debt was a lot easier. We had a couple of term sheets, from regional banks during that time as well. Yeah, it's when we started construction, September of last year, right? So now at this point, you're talking about a full year, right? So September of last year when we started construction, and those development fees, started to pay out during the time period of over construction and coming into the household like that. That is when it was like, okay, all right, G, you can do it.
Like you're on the golf course.
Yeah, the plane's in the air. The plane's in the air. So, yeah.
I realize now development, it honestly is delayed gratification.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just enough to do the work.
Yep.
And it's hope at the end. It takes a very strong mind in order to see everything to the end. And it's not for everybody. Like you have spreadsheet junkies on Wall Street. You have people who are operators who manage core stabilized buildings.
Yeah.
The people that can work on both ends definitely have this mental fortitude that I think separates them. So if you touched on Mr. Egbert Perry and other like prominent developers, it's not necessarily easy. And by no stretch of the imagination, it's the riskiest part of this business.
Yeah.
That you operate with it.
I mean, you're constantly solving problems. And I have to credit a lot of that to my time period of getting my mechanical engineering degree. I mean, literally engineering, all it is problem solving and figuring out the linear path of solution. And so like, I'm not going to get caught up in all these other smaller fires that aren't really fires, but I'm gonna focus on what is the core issues, right? And if I can get those things solidified, then everything else is settled. It falls into place. And so I will say I've kind of gotten to a point to where I pride myself on, and this is why I tell brokers to bring me your most complex deals, the ones that people have probably picked over and it makes sense. It would be a good deal, but there's a couple of things that people haven't been able to figure out, or they don't even want to figure it out. And that's typically the case. Some people just don't even want to deal with the brain damage. And so I'd rather go ahead and dig on it, especially for something that, again, I think is worth the time. And so I can unlock a lot of value of those more complex deals. Yeah.
So, thinking just out into the future, and I like that you brought up the students at Ron Clark Academy. When you think of the legacy that you want to leave and the empire that you're building, how would you ultimately like to be remembered?
Yeah, I think I want to be remembered as somebody that has been able to see an issue, solve the problem, and create something that's sustainable that ultimately, has an impact not just on, my family and my legacy, but ultimately to the overall community. And that's something that, it's maintain in perpetuity. That would be the ultimate goal. I think as of right now, it's like, developers for the most part are extremely lean, but there are a lot of opportunities where some developers say, okay, well, we're gonna have programmatic joint ventures and focus on different strategies. And, okay, at that point, we can add on talent. So let's just say we're not just developing, we want to do acquisitions and we have the capital for that. We can hire somebody to focus on value add acquisitions or core acquisitions, right? And then at that point, you're diversifying a little bit more. And then geographically, like, okay, well, right now I'm more of a heavy East Coast guy, but, I want to get to Texas. I want to get to California, right? And then, outside of the United States, okay, certain countries that make sense. I mean, there was actually a deal that I pursued pretty heavily in Jamaica, and that wasn't too far from the port, right? Yeah, because logistics and supply chain is a need, for all countries. And so,
We certainly need a
how can I
lot.
be
We need a
more
lot in Nigeria.
global? Say it again.
So we need a lot in Nigeria. So
Hey, man,
I would love
like,
to see it.
like between Nigeria, Ghana, those are, I mean, a lot of I did the whole, because my only connection that I was able to get as far as, to Africa is when I did the African ancestry, and it essentially said that majority of my bloodline, like about 85% of it, goes back to Burkina Faso, and that country there on the west side. I think it's like north of Ghana, but not too far from Nigeria as well. And so, um, and I've been since then. I've bought a lot of art from artists that's from Burkina Faso, and I mean it's all across, all in our house. And I follow necessarily what that president has been doing as well, which I do love what he's doing. Because the goal is definitely to get back and have a connection there with the African diaspora. I mean, expand that a lot more. Other countries as well. You certainly want to get to Europe. I understand that also.
And then lastly, before we conclude, what would be your call to action for the next generation of young Black leaders in this industry, outside of this industry, the students that run Clark Academy? What's your call to action for me, for all of us, in terms of, how we should get ourselves ready for what's ahead?
Yeah, no, just do more. I mean, it's like, at the end of the day, don't be so caught up necessarily in I need to do this, I need to stay in this bubble, and I need to, ultimately just get this job and focus on that job. It's like outside of your job and professional aspect, be involved in the community, grow your leadership skills there, because ultimately that does play into your workforce as well. And that also expands your relationships that you will be able to leverage later in your professional realm, right? So they play together, and just continue to want to do more, especially for your community, when there's limited opportunities necessarily. That we, like Black people, we do not have a choice really necessarily to just work and go home. There's not a lot of us in this space. And so we get a chance to be in this space. Don't waste it. Don't just be a waste of talent to where you can't provide other opportunities for others in the future. And don't be settled with just doing it for one person and saying, okay, well, I'm good. And he's like, no, so do more. So that would be what I got to say there.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for being so gracious with your time. We look forward when you come back on campus again to greet us. And
Yeah. Well, we got a tour. We got a tour, right? Coming up.
we do have a tour coming up in April.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing, work that started all the way back in Philadelphia. That's finally vesting. So thank you so much for being gracious with your time, and we'll see you shortly.
All right, man. Sounds good. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.